Welcome to the Living to 100 Club podcast. Here's our host, Dr. Joseph Casciani.
Well, hello to all of our listeners joining us today on our podcast. You're listening to one of our successful aging episodes this month on the Living to 100 Club program, and I'm your host, Joe Casciani. On each program, our conversations educate and inspire, helping you get the best out of all the years we're given, regardless of what obstacles come our way. You can learn more about my club at my website. Be sure to take a look at my new training and activities manual, Better, Longer, and Happier, a guide to aging with purpose and positivity. It's a series of 12 modules in a card deck format developed for activities directors at senior living communities and other groups. Learn more at living200.club/BLH. Now on to today's program. In today's episode of the Living to 100 Club podcast, I welcome Dr. Jim Polakof, a renowned author and wellness expert, to discuss his inspiring journey from the film industry to holistic medicine. Jim shares insights from his latest book, Live Healthy Longer, offering practical advice on health, longevity, and the secrets to living to 100. He also reveals the personal survival lessons he learned almost too late, and how these have shaped his mission to help others live healthier, more fulfilling lives. First, a little background. Dr. Jim Polakof is a former director and producer in the film industry who transitioned into holistic medicine, where he's worked with hundreds of medical practices across the U.S. and internationally to promote wellness. As an author and speaker, Jim focuses on nutrition, health, and longevity with his latest book, Live Healthy Longer, offering valuable insights into maintaining a healthy lifestyle well into later years of life. Dr. Jim now hosts his own health-oriented podcast and continues to inspire individuals to embrace healthier habits for a longer, more fulfilling life. Jim, welcome to our program today.
Well, thank you for having me, Dr. Joe. It's a pleasure to be with you. And by the way, just to clarify, I do appreciate you mentioning my book. The strange thing about Amazon is there are a number of books, titled, subtitled, Live Healthy Longer.
Yes.
So if someone's going to find it, it has to be Live Healthy Longer with Dr. Jim.
With
Dr. Jim.
Okay.
I know it sounds strange, but unfortunately,
well, no,
so many people are writing about longevity.
Yeah, that's a term of a lot of interest, sure, for readers. Yeah, okay, I'll be sure to qualify that. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to our conversation today. You've got a lot to share, and I'm glad to be the messenger for your messages. So let me open by asking you to tell us just maybe the highlights of the journey that brought you to where you are today. You've covered a lot of ground over the years, but what are the points that stand out that brought you to where you are today?
Well, you said correctly. I covered a lot of ground for so many years, like 86 years. Some people are in disbelief, but others say, oh, you look it. But in any case, I do feel good at my age. It's an interesting, probably strange journey because I was making movies. I wrote and directed and produced largely 10 motion pictures. And I said, I guess this is my vocation in life. But for some reason, I thought there was more to it. Making movies is a feast or famine business. It is a business. But I felt that there's something else I could do that was out there for me. And one of the things I noticed, particularly among actors, other people in the entertainment industry, is they got old very quickly. And I say that facetiously. I mean, makeup does wonderful things when you see them on screen. But these people, many of them were suffering from stress, from eating the wrong foods,
Mm.
not getting proper exercise. And I said, that's something perhaps I might be able to help out on.
Oh.
So that's when I began to study nutrition, and that's what got me into the field. Both my wife and I actually studied nutrition, and where we earned our PhDs.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So that planted the seeds for you to investigate and learn and maybe share some of this information with others. So you pursued your graduate work and got your degree, your doctorate degree. So any actors stand out in particular who, well, maybe you don't want to mention any names, but
Oh, I
uh,
don't mind to mention names,
yeah,
but it depends. I suppose, Joe, that the age of your audience is pretty much close to the age of my audience,
yeah,
so
I
to
think so.
speak.
Yeah,
So they might remember some of the names. One name stands out because I really tried to help him out. He was in bad shape actually when he was in my movie. Uh, Oscar nominee winner by the name of Tony Curtis. You might remember that name.
I do,
Uh,
of course.
right. And Tony had, of course, he's not with us any longer, but Tony had some real problems with drug addiction. His eating habits were horrible. Uh, but he was on that track that he tried to make better of himself, you might say. But unfortunately, he did a few relapses until he
Mm.
actually moved to Hawaii after he retired. And then he changed his lifestyle, but it was too late at that point in
Uh,
time. But those are the types of people we
sure.
might remember: uh, Chuck Connors, Sonny Bono. There's a whole slew of Carol Lindley, a whole slew of
Oh,
actors that I worked with,
yeah,
that I enjoyed working with. It
yeah.
was a fabulous career, and I was very excited. I wouldn't want to change anything, except I'm glad I got out of it when I did and
Mm.
got into something to me that was more meaningful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you're right. We learn a lot of lessons as we go down that road, and we can make more informed decisions today than we could a generation or two generations ago. And that's what our education is all about, helping people, give them the information that we can to help them make these informed decisions. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that. So why did you write the book, Live Healthy Longer? What inspired you to focus on longevity and health?
Well, of course, being the age that I am was certainly a starting point. I thought others might like to know, because I did have some challenges along the line, and much of it was due to my very early eating habits. But I decided that here I am at 86 years old. I do have some back problems. I think much of that from my tennis career, which is another lifetime, so to speak. But in any case, I really felt that I'm healthy. I feel great. I'm still working, obviously, doing podcasts, writing books,
Mm,
uh, and perhaps I had some things that I should share with others to say,
mm,
when you get into your 60s and your late 60s and your 70s and your 80s, you still have a shot at it without having to be heavily medicated to combat whatever disease you might encounter. So I thought I should share why I got to live this long and be healthy at the same time, enjoying life.
mhm. Yeah. Well, we do learn a lot, and I'm glad to hear that you're putting some of those ideas and lessons into your book and your writings. So you mentioned that transitioning from the film industry to your current work in holistic medicine, you learned a lot by interacting with others, observing others. Are there lessons that you learned from that earlier career to holistic medicine that you're putting into practice now? I mean, giving advice to people is one thing, but other things that you learned about progress and staying successful? Any ideas that you can kind of translate into your current work?
Well, of course, remembering back on the movie business, when they use the term rat race, it
Uh,
actually was, you're at a heavy pace. When I was directing movies, I would start out at 6 o'clock in the morning normally
mm,
to prepare for perhaps a shoot that starts at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and then after the day was done, I wolfed down my lunch because
mm,
I had to prepare for the next shot that was being set up. So, I certainly wasn't eating healthy. I grabbed whatever I could reach, a sandwich, certainly not good foods. And then, of course, at night, I then have to sit down with my editor to
Mm.
look at the dailies from the day before to say, oh, we're going to need to reshoot this or whatever the case might be. So by the time I got to bed, it was oftentimes midnight, 1 o'clock in the
Wow.
morning.
Yeah.
And then at 5 or 6 a.m., it starts all over again,
Wow.
6 days a
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was really like I was on a very, very fast treadmill.
Mm.
So managing stress was something I didn't know how to do at the time. Fortunately, I was young. I was in my late 20s when I began. I
Wow.
was in my 30s when I was at the height of my career. So I was able to do that. But the problem is, it really came back to haunt me. And if you'd like me to tell you a little bit about that,
Mm.
um, I thought once I learned nutrition and both my wife and I started really eating healthy and living the kind of life we should be living,
Mm.
still in 2009, which is what, about 15, 16 years ago, I had to have a heart bypass.
Uh,
Now, I'm very fortunate because at this tennis club that I played at, um, I was playing a lot of tennis. It was very, very hot. It was hot and humid.
mm.
I would play in the heat of the day. And here I am, at this
Yeah.
point in time in my 70s.
Yeah.
But I was a good tennis player. I won some championships. And in any case, I kept at it. But I felt great. I mean, I felt fine. But then I had my annual treadmill test. And in the middle of the test, the cardiologist said, we've got to stop.
Mm.
There's something wrong. And
Wow.
that they were picking up. I wasn't feeling, fatigued or anything. But I found out that my arteries were blocked in 5 areas.
Mm.
So I had to face that bypass surgery, which I obviously didn't relish, and then
Mm.
bounce back from that. But what I didn't realize, because I did some further research, is why did this happen to me? I mean, my goodness, I was eating right, I was exercising, I think I had my stress well in tow. But by the same token, how did this happen? Now, I didn't feel any chest pains, thank goodness. And by the way, on that same tennis court, 2 weeks later, a player in my age group fell to the ground and died right on the
Ah,
spot
wow.
with the
Okay.
same situation
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
Now, I traced it back and did some further research, and what we don't realize is that the habits that we have, whether it's smoking, whether it's eating wrong when we're young, that stays with us for the rest of our lives. And even though uh, we change our environment, our
Mm-hmm.
situation, the way we eat, we're healthy. Even though it changes, it still comes along, which is, I learned 2 lessons from that.
Yeah.
Number one, if you have grandkids, pass on the lesson and try to get them
Mm.
into good habits when they're young, because if
Mm.
not, eventually it's going to catch up with them.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is to be checked regularly. Thank God I was smart enough, wise enough to do annual treadmills, or they never would have picked it up. And I would have been the player who dropped to the court and didn't get back up. So
Mm.
those are 2 things I learned from it.
2 important lessons, sure. And the whole idea of kind of passing on those lessons to others. I mean, you're talking about early lifestyle patterns that linger on, even if we stop and change. Like the effects of smoking take their toll on the body well after we stop. I mean, it decreases, of course, but just like poor diet and nutrition, inactivity, these things can linger. I mean, it's not like they go away when we turn the door for a more healthy lifestyle. They we're healthier, of course, and we're making the right choices. But you're saying the effects of that high stress environment, fast paced environment, rat race, so to speak, really did take its toll on you. Yeah,
And my food choices,
and
not
your food.
necessarily my food choices
Yeah,
when I was young. I grew up on a farm, which,
yeah,
theoretically you should be very healthy in that
sure.
type of environment. I
Yeah,
worked
yeah.
and as a young lad, I just recall our meals, and I didn't really think about this until later, but we'd start off the day with bacon and eggs or sausage
Mm.
and eggs,
Hmm.
which, you know, my feeling is that meat is not necessarily your best friend, but we'd start off the day that way. I loved hamburgers, so I'd have a hamburger for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And at dinner, now you have steak to choose from and pork chops
Yeah.
and all of the unhealthy mashed potatoes with tons of butter and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That stayed with me. And that's why I say, if you can give advice to young ones, it's to start making those easy choices right on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those do linger with you.
Yeah.
Now, the good news is you can change that.
Yes.
I would not be alive did I not adopt healthy habits and learn how to eat better and manage my stress. I would not be alive today were it not the fact that I did that, because that saved my life. I didn't even know what was going on in my chest.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that I had 5 arteries that were almost completely blocked.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have known that, but I lived because the fact that I changed. So changing at any age can be very important in my opinion.
That's the important lesson here, right? No matter where we are, changing for a more positive lifestyle. I mean, I love the study about, NIH found that our longevity is due to genetics about 25 to 30% of the time. And our longevity is due to lifestyle about 70 or 75% of the time. So that shows that so much of our longevity, how long we live, is really under our control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, as I'm a psychologist and I know the challenges of trying to change behavior when people are unhappy with a certain behavior pattern, maybe overeating or smoking or substance abuse. It's very hard to change behavior. What have you learned about, key behavior changes related to diet and turning that corner into more healthy lifestyle? What are some of the answers that you've come upon?
Well, since nutrition is my specialty, I'll
Yeah.
focus on that for a moment, if I may. Um, One of the things that frustrated me as a nutritional counselor, and that's why I think I moved into setting up wellness programs at medical practices. The thing that frustrated me is I would have very well-intentioned clients, shall we call them,
Mhm.
who would come to me and said, "Gee, Dr. Jim, I really want to lose weight, and I'm motivated, and it's important, and I know it's important to my health and my longevity. So what should I do?" And then you would find out how to individualize or tailor a plan
Mhm.
to what their specific needs were. So we do that. And for the first couple of weeks, it went great. And I'm just giving you a typical example. But after that, I noticed that oftentimes the patients would, shall we say, postpone a session,
Uh-huh.
or they would come in and they would be very honest at times and say, I tried, but I kind of slipped back into my old habits. And then they were embarrassed. Many were embarrassed to even come back again for further counseling
Mhm.
because they were not following
Yeah.
advice. They were not following the plan that we'd worked out together. So what I really learned from this, and I think it's important, at first I thought, oh, well, perhaps nutrition carry over a 6-month period of time so you could stay right on top of it week after week. But most people really don't want to get involved with long-term contracts and things of that nature.
Sure.
What I really learned from this is if you're going to eat better, and if you're going to lose weight in particular, and let's face it, as we get older, our metabolism slows down substantially.
Mhm.
And when we're in the 60s, it slows to a fairly moderate pace, you might
Yeah.
say, but in the 70s, even more, in the 80s, even more.
Yeah.
So with that slow metabolism, we have to eat better if we're going to live healthy. So I say that it's not just an individual thing. You really need a support system around you.
Mm.
If you're an alcoholic, and I don't necessarily say the two are equally comparative, but if you're an alcoholic, you've got a sponsor who works with
Mhm.
you, who
Sure.
kind of oversees what you're doing, who kind of supports you. And
Sure.
I think as a psychologist, you probably found the same thing. If you have a support group, your spouse, your significant other, who, for example, eats with you every day, but if they keep eating the foods that tempt you, if they keep eating the foods that are not good for you, you're going to be inclined to fall back into that pattern
Yeah.
and not be able to change nutritionally. So I found that it's important that obviously you say, I need to do something, but at the same time, you need a support group to really make it work. That's what I've learned.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree, but that close supervision, monitoring, feedback, just that monitoring, that support is important. But what stops people? What causes them to revert after they have a nice, clear plan of change? What happens? What goes on in their thinking that says, "Oh, I'm not gonna follow this," in so many words. Yeah.
Well, we'll look at some practical things since you and I both have audiences that are, uh, an aging group of people. We realize that we've gone through a lot in life. We've worked hard. We've done our best to raise a family in some cases. We've really put out a strong effort. Now it's time to relax. Now it's time to kick back and enjoy life. And my God, what's more enjoyable than sitting down and
Mm.
eating a good meal, having an apple pie a la mode,
Yeah.
you doing all those, tempting foods, I should say,
Sure.
that are at your fingertips. And if you're
Mm.
sitting next to someone who's eating the meal that they want to eat, and you look over and you say, God, I wish I was eating that meal. I mean, after all, I've lived a life, I've sacrificed. It's time for me to enjoy myself. I think seniors in particular
Mm.
just finally say, listen, I'm just going to live with it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go ahead and go back to what I really enjoy.
Mm.
And that's the problem is,
Yeah.
food can be enjoyed. Healthy food can be enjoyed. You don't
Sure.
have to eat bad
Sure.
foods to enjoy what you eat.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the mistake that most people make. So I think part of it is in the preparation of your food.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to a restaurant, you have no control over what they feed you. They're going to add as much sodium to their food to make it taste as good as they can.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their modus operandi. They're going to buy meats, for example, that are not as lean as they should be,
Mm.
or not from grass-fed cattle, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get the worst of what they have to serve. And as seniors, you tend to eat out more often. That's another
Yeah.
study that I
Yeah.
thought was interesting.
Yeah. More restaurants.
So you have to control
Mm.
how you prepare your food. And I think it has to be, if you're going to make a commitment and you have a significant other, hopefully that significant other will make the commitment with you to help you go through that. Prepare your meals so they're healthy. That's what I have found, at least.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point, Jim. That's a good point. I mean, we go through life and we understand that there are healthier foods, and at a certain point we say, "Oh, I think I'm entitled to, having a few beers and some burgers and or chips or whatever." And we can make those same choices. We can feel satisfied with healthy foods too, with healthy snacks. So learning what some of those healthier foods are to help us make those, what I call more informed decisions to
Right.
say,
I
okay,
found, for example, Joe, I found that I love hamburgers. I really do. I grew up
yeah,
with them. And I like to throw a slab of cheese on them to really make them good. The healthy thing I do is I put a lot of tomatoes, so that gives me that extra lycopene
yeah,
that really helps me from a nutritional standpoint. But I have found that when I take an Impossible Burger, just using something that
hmm
is available at any supermarket, and I put it on the patty, and then I take some low-fat Swiss cheese and
hmm
put it over that, I tell you, it's very, very
hmm
difficult. And I've done the test with others
yeah,
to say, "Oh, we're going to have hamburgers tonight," and they say, "Oh, well, this is really good,"
yeah,
and yet they're not eating that that red meat, that very heavily saturated fat meat that they normally
hmm
do in the hamburger,
hmm
and it still tastes wonderful. It's just a question of finding things that taste good to you that have the same effect
yeah.
that you need for good health.
Yeah, and they're coming out with many more substitutes now for a lot of the beef and even the seafood. They're creating some artificial seafood, synthetic seafood, whatever that doesn't have. I mean, it provides a lot of the same nutrients, but not the downsides
Well,
that a lot of
and
seafood.
you bring up a very good point with seafoods, for example. I recommend salmon strongly, but is farm raised as good as wild caught? Well, wild caught, is a few dollars a pound more,
Hmm.
but typically it's a more healthy fish. But
Sure,
any kind of salmon that you eat, I think is
it's
certainly going
healthy.
to be good for you,
Yeah,
whether it's farm raised or
yeah.
wild caught Alaskan salmon or sockeye salmon,
Mhm.
sardines, things of that nature. There are fish that you can eat, but for example, tilapia I stay away from because tilapia is typically an unhealthy fish.
Mm-hmm.
So I think here again, you have to
Yeah,
kind of judge
And
what
learn.
kind of food you're eating and where you're getting it from.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good, thanks. So when we spoke earlier, you mentioned a lot of the work that you did as a consultant to medical practices in the US and internationally, helping them to introduce some wellness programs. What were some of the themes that you came across that you encountered in these medical practices, and why were they looking to make a shift?
Well, let's begin with the primary care doctor. Um, as you know, you go to your primary care doctor for your, if you're a senior, probably a semi-annual visit
Uh,
to make sure your health is fairly good, check your blood pressure, medication, or your cholesterol, whatever the case might be. But the average time that a primary care doctor spends with you is 7 minutes.
yeah, yeah.
Now, in 7 minutes, how can you possibly give a patient, check them over, see what's happening in their life, and then give them good nutritional advice? Not possible. Nor is nutrition something that you study in medical school. So most doctors, unfortunately, are really not up to date on nutrition. So that's what inspired me to get more involved,
Mhm.
with wellness programs. Now you're going to be surprised. We've put together wellness programs for specialties ranging from primary care to OBGYNs,
Mm,
even a urologist.
mm.
But the majority of wellness programs I put together, would you like to guess what specialty it was in?
The most common specialty?
Well, the specialty that adopted and welcomed wellness programs to
Oh,
their practice.
um, no, I don't.
It's a tough one. Well, you'd say primary care or
Yeah,
OBGYNs, that would make sense,
yeah.
but it was plastic surgeons.
Oh,
Now,
I wouldn't have
the
guessed that. Yeah,
well, of
you're
course,
right.
most people don't. And
Yeah.
the reason for plastic surgeons is the fact that and it's an economic thing, they realize that after you do a procedure, the patient no longer needs you. And therefore, you lose the patient and you lose that referral base that most physicians
Mm,
depend upon, particularly plastic surgeons, since most of their
mm,
procedures are not covered by insurance. So many adopted the fact that if we institute a wellness program, which primary care doctors are not providing for their patients, we probably could retain patients longer,
uh,
have them come back for their esthetician services, shall we say,
uh-huh.
revert more patients to their practice. So it was a win-win situation. You're doing good for
Yeah.
your patients, and at the same time, you're helping yourself economically.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, most of the programs we set up, were for plastic surgeons. Now, the idea is really when you leave the practice after you're taught the staff how to do things, are they going to continue to do things the right way, or are they ultimately just going to put out little bulletins, wellness bulletins as we call them?
Mm,
So sticking to a program is so important.
mm.
When you have a patient, you really need to help to continue to encourage them to stay on their diets, on the way of life that they change, managing their stress and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I can see where the cosmetic surgery is kind of this external change, and any lifestyle changes, nutrition and attitudes about
Right.
eating and staying healthy, that's very internal. That doesn't show up. So I could see where the primary care doc or any other specialty says, well, let's integrate this external change and the internal change. Let's make sure they fit together. They complement one another because you can do one without the other. Not that you need both, but
Well, if you're eating right,
yeah.
it's going to really help improve your skin condition.
Yes, of course. That's
People
right.
are,
Yeah.
women in particular, are
Yeah.
very concerned
Yeah.
about the condition of their skin and how it ages and their wrinkles and all of that.
Yeah.
Healthy eating actually nourishes your skin.
Yeah. So what are your secrets to living to 100? That's we're on the same channel on that.
Well, you're right. I'm at
That
86, so I've got 14 years to go.
yeah,
Knock on wood, if nothing befalls me, any
yeah,
accidents or that sort of
yeah,
thing, it's likely I might make it because I'm healthy. I feel good. I have energy. But I think there are several things that have helped.
yeah.
One of the things, because we've been talking about food, one of the things that I have found is very, very helpful. And that is, I mentioned to you, I was an avid tennis player at one time.
Right.
Well, after a period of time on the hard surface and everything, you start to have back problems. And that's the thing to date that has still remained with me.
Mm.
I still have, my aching back. I mean,
Mm.
I lived through it, but I no longer can play tennis with the zeal that I used to because my back hurts too much. So
Mm.
the question I have to decide is, what am I going to be able to do? And I had a tennis injury to my shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
or I had an injury to my shoulder where I couldn't serve anymore. I really couldn't do anything. Even in the pool, I couldn't swim the free stroke because my arms wouldn't go
Oh,
properly. So
wow.
I had to find what I can do. And I think if I have advice for those of a senior age group, what you need to do is look for exercise or fitness regimes that you can actually do.
Yes.
And the two things I found, well, actually, there are three. One is pickleball, which is becoming a very, very popular sport now. And as you age, if you can't get out and play tennis or your body can't take that constant impact, pickleball is a great activity. But the two things that I found that really work, regardless of what shape your body might be in, even if you can't play pickleball, are two things. One, aqua jogging. Now, I mentioned to you I really
Yes.
couldn't freestyle any longer, but I can get into the pool with a noodle and I could begin jogging.
Mm-hmm.
The noodle gives me the buoyancy. My legs are moving as if I were running, and yet I'm in water, so I have no pain whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
My back pain doesn't even flare up or doesn't bother me in the least
Mm.
when I'm doing this aqua jogging. So at least 3 times a week, sometimes four, I try to be sure that I'm doing some
Okay.
aqua jogging for about
Okay.
a half an hour.
Yeah.
Secondly, I have found out that you get some really good exercise from chair yoga.
Uh-huh.
And chair yoga, you can get the different things on YouTube to, be with somebody who for basically 25 minutes, you sit right in your chair, you move your body, you get exercise. It has cardiovascular abilities, or shall we say capabilities.
Mhm.
Uh, so these are two things that,
Yeah.
regardless of how old you are,
Yeah.
regardless of your aches and pains, your arthritis, your rheumatism, these are things you can do that will keep you healthy and living longer. And then, of course, there's managing stress. I feel that's very, very important. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that, many people just, they get on a treadmill and they get so busy during the day that they forget to take a little time for themselves to de-stress.
Yeah.
And I think that's also
Yeah.
very important.
All right. Those are important points, important recommendations for my listeners. Thanks for that. So, no matter what level of physical functioning we're at, even with some back strain or injuries, the aqua jogging is one remedy, one way to stay really to push for that endurance and mobility. And then the
And
chair
if you don't
yoga.
have it, right, if you don't have an indoor pool,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there are certain seasons, if you have an outdoor pool or you
Yeah.
go to an outdoor
Yeah.
pool,
Yeah.
outdoor pool that, you can only swim, but that's when you have to fall back on something like the chair yoga that I
Chair
was
yoga.
talking
Sure.
about.
Yeah. And I can see the chair yoga really helps with balance and stretching and even some strength building.
Yes.
So, yeah, and we know there's plenty of YMCA's around, and they have great programs for seniors and staying active. They have great indoor pools and outdoor pools, so I can see where the advantage is there too.
Right. Oh, you're absolutely right. Of course, you are in the wonderful country
Yeah,
of San Diego, where you have the greatest air-conditioned city in the world.
yeah,
Never gets too hot or too cold, except this past summer. But in any case, no, you're in an area where people can get out and do more. But if you happen to be in Minnesota, you don't
mm,
have quite that luxury. You can't get out of the
yeah,
house, so
yeah,
falling back on the chair, you in a bit of sheer yoga can get
yeah.
you through the bad times.
It's all about adapting, right? And finding ways to overcome some of those barriers that we encounter, some of those challenges, some of those setbacks. How do we adjust our lifestyle? How do we make different decisions based on some of the new limitations and continue to push forward and open new doors, as I say? Yeah.
That's right.
So you've been in the wellness industry for a long time now, and what do you see as the future of holistic medicine and wellness practices? Where are we headed?
Well, I think there's a positive side. I'm an optimist, so I always look to the positive. The only downside is because it's such a popular area, and there are people who, can, shall we say, make a buck at it. There are people out there giving advice that perhaps is not really good advice. So one has to be very, very careful where they get their nutritional advice, their fitness advice
Mm.
from. So I'd be very, very careful about not listening to everyone. The problem with the internet is everybody and their brother has different advice,
Sure.
from Aunt Sarah to Uncle Harry, that will tell you if you do this or you do that. I think it's important. The beauty of the internet and wellness, where it's going, is people. It gives, well, and I know you're going to ask about artificial intelligence like
Yeah.
Chat GPT, et cetera.
Yeah.
But if you don't mind my stepping in, I really feel that artificial intelligence is going to have a positive and negative benefit as we
Mm.
learn how to adapt to it. And that is, obviously we can find a ton of information, but sometimes not all that information is good. So we have to learn to decipher
Mm.
what
Yeah.
the good information and what the bad information is. But I see wellness as a field that's going to be growing because the senior population is growing.
Mm-hmm.
Soon the dominant population in America are going to be seniors. We're seeing that now
Yeah.
with elections. The senior vote is becoming more and more prevalent. So I think there's a wonderful future if you get the right advice and you be sure to do your research thoroughly. That's my advice.
Sure. Yeah, we have what I've heard called as the longevity bonus. We're living longer, more years, and we have more time to be productive and resourceful and to go after new things. But that also takes learning what the opportunities are. So being open to a lot of new approaches and Pilates and exercise and other fitness programs and nutrition. That's just a bonus that we have now. We can look for more ways to stay healthy and to look at new experiences, new opportunities. And I I can see where holistic medicine and I mean, I used to talk about the separation between mind and body. We used to refer to the physicians in the long-term care settings as, focusing on symptoms and problems and fixes. And we're as the mental health professional, we were always talking about, well, what's going on with the individual? Why are they depressed? What's their reaction to their stroke or their medical problem? So it's this combination and I think holistic medicine, lifestyle medicine, integrative medicine, whatever it's called, is merging these two different sides. And I think you're at the forefront of that. You understand what's going on with the person's attitude and outlook and how that affects their, you know,
I'm a believer of mind, body, and soul.
yeah.
That they all kind of, and regardless of what your spiritual beliefs might be, I think the spiritual element, even if you're not religious, has certainly plays a part. But it's not just the body; it's the mind. It's your mindset. Uh, it all comes together. You're absolutely correct.
Mhm.
We have to keep this in mind.
Yeah.
Doctors do focus on the bodies, unfortunately, where I think if they bring a little bit more of the mind and spirituality into it, then I believe they may achieve some greater benefits for their patients.
Sure. Yeah, we always found psychiatry to be the area for medication, psychotropic medication, anti-anxiety, anti-depression. And now I'm seeing this new subspecialty of nutritional psychiatry, which is so opposite what I had always seen in my career. It's good, of course, that it's good that maybe there are the whole changes that we can implement with improved nutrition in our mental health. So
Well,
that's
we've always evolved as a species, so
yeah, yeah,
hopefully the involvement is going to be beneficial. I think what you offer your clients in terms of the card decks and really
mm,
keeping people imaginatively involved, that's such a contribution you're personally making. I
yeah.
admire and compliment you for it.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Yeah, I think it's a way to dispel and combat some of those ageist attitudes, and let's start thinking about the upside of getting older, not the downside. Yeah,
That's exactly right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, how can people contact you if they have questions and want to buy your book?
Well, we have on our website, we have not only our podcasts, but we have things about books, blogs that are helpful from a health standpoint. I think that coming to the website can be valuable because we have we've had some great guests on it that can give you some good, nutritional fitness, stress management advice, even with Alzheimer's and things of that nature. But our website's very simple. If you remember how to spell my name, which is not simple, James is easy, but it's jamespolakof.com. Polakof is Polakof. So jamespolakof.com is my website where people can come to and hopefully discover a bit more. And then my book is, as you mentioned, I thank you for it, is Live Healthy Longer with Dr. Jim. And that's available in most places, but certainly on Amazon.com, where most people are going for their books today, apparently. So those are the two sources. I really appreciate you shining some light on that for us.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. Well, just to summarize, jamespolakof.com and Live Healthy Longer with Dr. Jim. A lot of good information. I've been to your website. You have some great podcasts too, and a lot of resources. So that's great. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to you being part of our podcast also.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's coming up. I'm looking forward to that as well. Well, Jim, it looks like we're out of time for today, but before we wrap up, I just want to remind my listeners to visit my website, living200.club, sign up for my email list, and you can download a free copy of my 9 tips to make living longer enjoyable. And if you're affiliated with a senior living setting or community, be sure to look for my new training manual, Better, Longer, and Happier. Dr. Jim Polakof, thanks so much for being a guest on our program today.
My pleasure. It's been enlightening.
Great. You're welcome. And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Hope to see you next time.